Observation. Observation is a long-term research method favoured by interpretive sociologists. It involves spending considerable time with the subjects of the study, watching their interactions, and recording events as they take place. This enables the researcher to build a deep understanding of the events they observe. The researcher may be a participant, so they can actually experience the lives of their subjects and feel their emotions, or they may simply observe as non-participant. In either case, the researcher will gain a very deep insight into their subject's social world. This type of research is often called ethnographic research, a term originated in anthropological studies of small-scale societies. In his classic study of street corner society, Bill White commented that he'd found answers to questions he would not have had the sense to ask. In other words, this data would have been missed by a quantitative study. The researcher will also see the group over a long period of time, from many months to several years, and will therefore be in a position to gain the trust of the group and to understand the impact of social change. However, the closeness to the group may make it difficult not to influence their behaviour, and also provide problems in leaving the group when the study is complete. There can be a danger that the sociologist may go native, that is, prioritising their role within the group and forgetting the study. Researchers have adopted various strategies here, such as keeping in contact with their mentor, or wearing a significant item such as a wristband, which reminds them of their research role. Observation has a number of other disadvantages. It clearly requires the researcher to be fully committed to the research project, possibly living with the subjects over a long period of time. Thus, it is both expensive and time-consuming. Furthermore, only one group, or a very small number of groups, can be studied. It may not be possible to generalize the findings to other groups, which may appear to be similar. This can partly be overcome by using observation in triangulation with other quantitative methods. Observation can be done overtly, so the subject knows they are being studied, or covertly, in secret. Each method has both advantages and drawbacks. Each of these types of observation will now be considered in turn. Firstly, overt observation. The clear advantage of overt observation is that the subject understands that they are part of the research and can cooperate with the researcher by answering questions and volunteering useful information, providing contacts, and introducing the researcher into situations they wish to study. Thus, detailed information can be openly collected and recorded. This immediacy gives rise to high-quality information. Overt observation is also ethical. It is clearly immoral to deceive people, so by informing them beforehand that they are the subject of the research, one can seek their informed consent, both to the study and its publication. This may remove some, but not all of the pressures to take part in illegal activity. But getting permission to study a group may take a long time. It took Willis 6 months to get permission for his classic work with the lads in Learning to Labour. Even with the relevant permissions, if people on the ground refuse to cooperate, then the study becomes very difficult, as Valerie Hay found in her initial school study. Both Hay and Willis wanted to study groups of school students, but both were adults. Willis adopted a friendly adult role in the coffee bar, a sort of informal youth worker, and so was able to gain the acceptance of the group. Even if the subject consents to the study, there are further problems. Those who have been in a classroom in the presence of an Ofsted inspector will recognise that both the teacher and the class may behave quite differently. The class may cooperate in an exaggerated way. The lesson may be different from the normal format, and the walls may be covered with neatly marked work and relevant posters. In other words, once people know they're being watched, they behave differently. This problem is known as the Hawthorne effect. Overt research may also be non-participant, which means the group may simply be observed by a sociologist sitting with a clipboard and an observation schedule, recording the group activities. This is probably when the Hawthorne effect is the greatest danger. It's very difficult to forget you're being observed if someone is obviously recording your every move. So much for overt observation. Now we turn our attention to covert observation. This is often used for the study of illegal behaviour, as most criminals will not consent to being observed in action. It is exciting work and can be dangerous. Heidenson suggests that youngest male sociologists seek this work to remind them of their youth. In covert research, sociologists may also use an existing situation or contact to gain access to the groups they wish to study. There are a number of other famous examples of key informants or gatekeepers, including James Patrick's classic study of a Glasgow gang. Patrick was introduced to the gang by Tim, a young man he'd met in the criminal justice system. Tim was able to ensure Patrick was accepted by the group and to guide him on how to behave, whilst Patrick could question Tim about the significance of events. In order to succeed, Patrick had to be male. The roles open to a young woman would not have been appropriate for a sociological researcher. It is obvious that he had to be young. He must also have been prepared to put himself into harm's way to complete his study and to work long hours. His recording was done after a long day with the gang. Patrick was sickened by the violent behaviour of the gang, and his failure to embrace it enthusiastically led eventually to gang suspicions, and, realizing what would be in store for him, he fled for his life. When a researcher is spending long hours with the subjects of his research, it's difficult for them not to influence the behaviour they're observing. This is illustrated in Bill White's Street Corner Society. Bill's key informant, Doc, explained that, "You have slowed me up plenty since you've been down here. Now when I do something, I would have to think what Bill White would want to know about it and how to explain it. Before, I just used to do things by instinct." Where researchers are covert, recording the data is an issue, and each has developed a way of overcoming the problem. In Ditton's study of pilfering in the bakery, he took to recording on toilet paper, until management thought he was ill and wanted to send him home. Price decided not to record anything that was more than 3 days old, because he didn't trust his memory beyond that point. Field diaries are therefore written as often as possible, rather than regularly and routinely, and may omit important information as a result. Covert participant observers face a number of ethical issues in their research. Firstly, they obviously don't have the informed consent of the subjects. Secondly, by observing illegal actions and not reporting them to the police, the researcher is making themselves an accessory to that action, and therefore committing a criminal offence. Thirdly, if one covertly joins a group involved in illegal behaviour, then taking part in it is a precondition of being accepted. Being a sociologist may not be a sufficient defence if one is arrested. And, while sociologists may have a right to put their own life in danger, does that extend to other people? Moore sent young female researchers to hang around with young drug takers, and Bourgeois moved his wife and young son to live in a deprived suburb of New York in order to study crack houses and drug dealers. Finally, the researcher has a responsibility to the subjects of his research not to damage them by the study. This can be problematic when studies are published, because even a pseudonym may not hide the identity of the criminal. So what can we conclude from all this? Observation is an important sociological method that's favoured by interpretive sociologists and others to gain detailed, in-depth information about groups of people. In some cases, as with young criminals, it may be the only possible way to gain information. The method requires huge commitment from the sociologists. It is time-consuming and expensive and may be dangerous. There can also be serious ethical problems. However, there is no better way to gain valid, in-depth information for sociological study.